The grand Whitman estate stood against the evening sky, its towering columns and sprawling gardens bathed in the golden glow of lanterns. Inside, in the opulent dining room, the air was thick with tension. A long mahogany table stretched across the space, set with gleaming silverware and delicate china, but the food remained mostly untouched. At one end of the table, David Whitman sat stiffly, his expression dark with resentment. Across from him, his father sipped a glass of wine, his movements measured and deliberate. His mother, seated beside his father, watched David intently, her fingers folded neatly in her lap. David pushed his plate aside, the steak on it now cold and forgotten. "This isn't happening," he muttered, his voice sharp in the heavy silence. His father, unbothered, swirled the wine in his glass before answering. "It isn't a request, David. It's a decision that has already been made." David exhaled sharply, running a hand through his dark hair. "A decision made without me. How generous." His mother stiffened at his sarcasm. "Enough, David. This isn't just about you. It's about the family, about protecting everything we've built." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "And the best way to do that is by marrying me off to a woman I've never even met? What century are we in?" His father set his glass down with a quiet clink. "You will meet her soon enough. Her name is Anna. She's from a respectable family. This arrangement benefits everyone." David scoffed. "Respectable family? Is that why she hides behind a veil? What exactly is she hiding?" His mother's expression tightened. "Don't be cruel, David. Anna is a private person. She has her reasons." David's eyes narrowed. "No, but apparently I owe her a lifetime." His father's patience began to wear thin. "Because you are the heir to this family," he said firmly, "and the Whitmans are critical to our business. This marriage is as much a partnership as it is a union." David let out a slow, dry laugh, leaning back in his chair. "A partnership? So it's a transaction, a contract to be signed. Love clearly has no place here." His mother's tone softened slightly. "You're not being asked to love her, David, just to respect her and to fulfill your duty." He clenched his fists under the table. "My duty," he echoed, the words like iron shackles around his throat. "To marry a stranger, to give up any chance of choosing my own future. You will have everything you could ever need," his father said smoothly. "And so will she." David pushed back his chair suddenly, the legs scraping against the polished floor. "I don't need this," he said, his voice low and simmering with anger. "And I don't need her." His mother stood as well, her tone carrying the finality of a queen issuing a decree. "You will meet her tomorrow, at dinner, and I expect you to behave like the man we raised you to be." David stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. He wanted to fight. He wanted to refuse. But the weight of their expectations pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. Without another word, he turned on his heel and strode out of the dining room. Upstairs, in the solitude of his room, David poured himself a drink, staring out at the twinkling city skyline. The liquor burned as it went down, but it did nothing to dull the fire of resentment inside him. An arranged marriage, to a woman who wouldn't even show her face. It felt like a bad joke, a relic from a time long past. Tomorrow, he would meet this Anna. Tomorrow, he would see what kind of game his parents were playing. One thing was certain. He wasn't going to make this easy for anyone. The following evening, the Whitman estate was alive with quiet preparations. The dining room had been meticulously arranged, the long table set with fine china and polished silverware, the crystal chandelier casting a golden glow over the room. The atmosphere was one of elegance and formality, yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. David arrived, his expression carefully neutral, but inside, frustration burned. He had spent the entire day contemplating ways to derail this ridiculous arrangement, but here he was, playing along, if only to see this woman for himself. The woman who, for reasons unknown, refused to show her face. His father greeted him with a curt nod, his mother with a forced smile. "She'll be here shortly," she said, smoothing the front of her silk dress as if to compose herself. David merely adjusted the cuffs of his sleeves, offering a non-committal response under his breath. He wanted to get this over with. Then came the sound of heels against the polished marble floors. The room hushed slightly, the air shifting as the woman entered. She moved with a kind of effortless grace, her posture straight, her head held high. She was accompanied by an older man, one of the Whitman patriarchs, a sign of just how important this alliance was. David's gaze swept over her. She was draped in a deep navy gown, elegant in its simplicity. But it was the veil, long, flowing, obscuring every feature but her eyes, that held his attention. Gray eyes, sharp and striking, meeting his without hesitation. His mother stepped forward first, offering the woman a warm smile. "David, this is Anna." Anna inclined her head slightly, her voice smooth and controlled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, David." David hesitated for the briefest moment before extending his hand automatically. "Likewise," he said, though there was little conviction behind the word. They took their seats, the atmosphere stiff with formality. Their parents engaged in light conversation, discussing business affairs and mutual acquaintances, but David barely listened. His attention kept drifting back to Anna, to the veil, to the woman beneath it. Why was she hiding? What was she concealing? A scar? A birthmark? Or was it something else entirely? He had never considered himself particularly vain, but the secrecy irritated him. More than that, it unnerved him. Halfway through dinner, his patience snapped, setting his fork down with a quiet clink against his plate. He turned to Anna, keeping his voice low but firm. "You don't have to keep that on, you know. No one here is going to judge you." His mother shot him a warning glance, but Anna remained composed. She met his gaze with unwavering calm. "I appreciate your concern," she said, her tone neither defensive nor apologetic. "But I prefer to keep it on." David raised an eyebrow, leaning back slightly in his chair. "What?" His voice held a trace of challenge. "Are you hiding something?" His mother stiffened. "David, it's fine," Anna interrupted, her voice steady. She turned fully to him, her gray eyes cool and assessing. "I'm not hiding anything that matters." David felt the weight of those words settle between them. "Nothing that matters," he repeated, tasting the phrase like something bitter. "That's an interesting way to put it." Anna tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Isn't that what this is?" she asked, her tone almost conversational. "An arrangement? A transaction? Your parents need an alliance, and my family needs the same. There's no need to complicate it with unnecessary emotions or expectations." David had expected defensiveness, maybe even embarrassment. What he hadn't expected was this calm, calculating clarity. She wasn't shy. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't playing the role of a docile, obedient bride. She had accepted this marriage on her terms. He let out a quiet scoff, shaking his head. "So that's how you see it? No love, no compassion, just a business deal." Anna didn't blink. "Do you believe otherwise?" For the first time in a long time, David found himself without words. She had matched him challenge for challenge, without ever raising her voice. The veil, which at first seemed like a barrier, was beginning to feel more like a statement, a declaration that she would not be defined by what he or anyone else expected her to be. And that infuriated him. But buried beneath his frustration, something else stirred. Curiosity. Who was this woman? The grand ballroom of the Whitman estate was bathed in warm golden light, its chandeliers gleaming above a sea of finely dressed guests. The scent of fresh roses filled the air, mingling with the faint notes of a string quartet playing in the background. It was a wedding fit for royalty, luxurious, extravagant, the kind that made headlines. But to David, it felt like an elaborate performance, a show meticulously staged for the benefit of the wealthy elite who whispered behind gloved hands and crystal champagne flutes. He stood at the end of the aisle, his jaw tight, his posture rigid as he awaited his bride. His mind was blank, save for the relentless question looping in his head. Why am I here? He barely heard the officiant's words, barely registered the admiring glances from guests as he stood before them in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. His eyes remained fixed ahead, on the entrance to the grand hall, waiting. Then the murmurs began. A shift in the air, A soft collective gasp, a ripple of hushed voices sweeping through the crowd like wind over water. Anna had arrived. She moved down the aisle with effortless grace, her white gown flowing around her like liquid silk. The delicate embroidery shimmered under the chandeliers, the long train gliding soundlessly over the marble floor. Yet, it wasn't the gown that held everyone captive. It was the veil, still there, still concealing, still unwavering. David's hands curled into fists at his sides as he caught glimpses of the guests' reactions. Subtle glances exchanged, barely hidden curiosity flickering across painted lips and raised brows. He could almost hear the unspoken questions. Why won't she remove it? What is she hiding? He exhaled sharply, his gaze flickering to his parents seated in the front row. His father's expression was unreadable, his mother's gaze expectant. Neither looked surprised. Of course not. They had planned this. They had known. Anna finally reached him, her movements composed, her head tilted slightly, as if gauging his reaction. The only part of her visible, those piercing gray eyes, met his through the veil, steady and unafraid. David swallowed down his irritation as the officiant spoke, guiding them through the ceremony. He repeated the vows, but the words felt hollow, as though they belonged to someone else. When the rings were exchanged, Anna's fingers were cool against his own, her touch fleeting, distant. Then came the moment. You may kiss the bride. The air in the room tightened. Even the quartet seemed to hush. David hesitated. He had expected something, a sign, a shift, an indication that now was the time. But Anna stood motionless, her face still concealed beneath the sheer fabric. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Every instinct told him to rip the veil away, to demand an answer in front of all of them. Instead, he clenched his jaw, inhaled deeply, and leaned forward, his lips brushing against the veil-covered cheek. A kiss that wasn't a kiss at all. There was a polite round of applause, though he could hear the confusion beneath it. The murmurs reignited, low but insistent, weaving through the guests like static. Did she really just let that happen? Why wouldn't she lift it? Maybe there's a reason. David stepped back, his fingers twitching at his sides. The officiant carried on, but his mind was elsewhere, frustration twisting in his gut. At the reception, the whispers followed them like shadows. He heard them as he made his way through the ballroom, champagne glass in hand, nodding absently at guests who came to offer their congratulations. He caught snippets of conversation, the hushed curiosity barely masked behind polite smiles. She's still wearing it. I've never seen anything like this. Maybe she's hideous. That has to be it. Or disfigured. A scar, perhaps? An accident? God, imagine marrying someone you've never even seen. David's grip on his glass tightened. He had thought he didn't care, had convinced himself that Anna's appearance, whatever it was irrelevant, that the veil was an annoyance, nothing more. But this constant speculation, it clawed at him. He turned his gaze toward the head table, where Anna sat, seemingly oblivious to the gossip surrounding her. She remained composed, untouched by the scrutiny, her posture perfect as she conversed quietly with his mother. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. David swallowed down the unfamiliar sensation curling in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. Frustration? No, something closer to defiance. The night dragged on in a blur of empty conversations and strained politeness. He watched Anna from the corner of his eye, searching for a crack in her demeanor, a moment of hesitation that never came. By the time they reached their private suite, his patience had worn thin. The moment the door clicked shut behind them, he pulled off his tie, tossing it aside as he turned to face her. Are you going to keep that thing on forever? His voice was sharper than he intended, the frustration that had simmered all night finally spilling over. Anna removed her gloves with meticulous care, setting them neatly on the dresser before turning to him. Until I'm ready. David let out a short, humorless laugh. Ready for what? He gestured toward her. To reveal whatever it is you're hiding? Or are you just enjoying whatever game you're playing? Anna's gaze didn't waver. This isn't a game, David. Then what is it? He stepped closer, his hands braced against the edge of the dresser, knuckles white. Because I'm the one standing there while people whisper about my wife like she's some kind of mystery. Do you have any idea what that's like? Her expression remained unreadable, but there was something beneath the veil, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. If their opinions matter more to you than I do, she said, her voice measured, then perhaps you should reconsider what this marriage is about. David inhaled sharply, caught off guard by the quiet weight of her words. It was ridiculous, really. The whole situation was absurd. And yet, something in her tone struck a nerve, unsettling him in a way he hadn't expected. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. I just want to know the truth, Anna. Why won't you let me see you? When the time is right, she said simply. And who decides that? Ido. The finality in her voice left no room for argument. David stared at her, frustration and confusion tangling into a knot inside his chest. Finally, with a quiet curse under his breath, he turned away, pouring himself a glass of whiskey from the sweets bar. Fine, he muttered, downing the drink in one burning gulp. Keep your secrets. Anna said nothing. Instead, she sat at the vanity, removing her earrings with the same deliberate grace as before. The silence between them thickened, heavy and unyielding. David stared out the window, his mind spinning. This was not the life he had imagined. And yet, despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Anna than she was letting on. That beneath the veil, beneath the composed exterior, there was something he wasn't seeing. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he needed to know what it was. David had always been good at avoidance. In the days following the wedding, he threw himself into work, drowning in contracts, negotiations, and board meetings. Anything to keep his mind occupied. Anything to keep him away from the quiet weight of his new reality. He left early, came home late. If he happened to cross paths with Anna, it was only in passing, a fleeting glimpse of her walking through the halls, always composed, always unreadable beneath that damn veil. She never sought him out, never asked for his time. She simply existed within the house, moving through it like she belonged, while David pretended she didn't. And yet, no matter how much he tried to ignore her, he started noticing things. The first time, it was unintentional. One morning, on his way out, he caught sight of her in the foyer. She was speaking with one of the housekeepers, an older woman who had worked for his family for years. The woman had dropped something, a delicate porcelain vase that had shattered across the marble floor. A mistake that, in any other household of their status, would have resulted in swift punishment. But Anna didn't scold her. She knelt down, gloved hands carefully gathering the broken pieces, her voice quiet but reassuring. "It's all right, Mrs. Hale," she said softly. "It's just porcelain, not irreplaceable." Mrs. Hale looked near tears, shaking her head. "I'll get someone to—" "No need," Anna interrupted, offering a kind smile that David had never seen before. "We'll clean it up together." David stood frozen at the base of the staircase, watching as his wife, his mystery of a wife, helped a servant pick up shattered glass with the same grace she carried at the dinner table. No hesitation, no arrogance, just a quiet, effortless kindness. It unsettled him more than he cared to admit. That same evening, he came home late, expecting the house to be silent. Instead, as he passed the kitchen, he heard something he hadn't expected. Laughter. Not the polite, measured kind that one might expect at a high society event. This was warm, genuine, the kind that filled a space rather than merely occupied it. Curious, David stopped just outside the door, peering in. Anna stood near the counter, surrounded by the kitchen staff. She was speaking animatedly, gesturing with her hands as she recounted some story he had walked in too late to hear. Whatever it was, it had the staff completely enchanted. "You've outdone yourself tonight, Mrs. Hale," Anna said, glancing at the cook with appreciation. "The soufflé was perfect. I might need to steal your recipe." The older woman beamed. "Oh, you flatter me, Mrs. Whitman." Anna leaned in slightly, lowering her voice in a mock whisper. "I don't flatter. I just know good food when I taste it." Another ripple of laughter. David stood there, unseen, a strange tightness in his chest. No one in his family had ever spoken to the staff that way. Not because they were cruel, but because it simply wasn't done. The lines had always been drawn. Employers and employees, separate lives, separate worlds. And yet, here was Anna, blurring those lines as though they had never existed in the first place. He didn't understand her. The veil, the secrecy, the coldness she had shown him. It all painted a picture of a woman who was distant, detached. And yet, the more he watched her, the more he realized she wasn't distant at all. She moved through life with quiet confidence, not demanding attention, yet somehow drawing it all the same. She didn't have to raise her voice to command respect. She simply had it, and that perhaps was what unnerved him most. It wasn't beauty that made people gravitate toward her. It wasn't wealth or power. It was her. One evening, days later, David was in his study, drowning in numbers, frustration mounting over a failing business deal. The merger, which was supposed to be seamless, was crumbling at the final stages, the opposing side hesitant over a specific clause. David leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Need some help." He nearly jumped. Anna stood at the doorway, hands clasped in front of her, posture as elegant as ever. David narrowed his eyes. "This isn't exactly your area of expertise." She tilted her head slightly. "You might be surprised." Before he could protest, she stepped forward, crossing the room with unhurried confidence. She picked up one of the documents, skimming over the text. "The issue isn't the numbers," she said after a moment. "It's the phrasing in this clause." David frowned, leaning over to see where she was pointing. "This part is too ambiguous," she continued, tapping a finger lightly against the paper. "It makes it sound like there's room for renegotiation when, in reality, there isn't. That's why they're hesitating." David stared at the page, processing her words. "You think that's the reason?" Anna glanced up, her expression unreadable. "I don't think," she said simply. "I know." There was no arrogance in her tone, no attempt to impress him. Just quiet certainty. And the worst part? She was right. David exhaled, shaking his head as he leaned back. "How do you even know this?" Anna set the paper down, her posture relaxed. "I may not be part of your world," she said, "but that doesn't mean I'm ignorant of how it works." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving David to stare after her, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't just playing the part of a Whitman wife. She was watching, listening, understanding. And for the first time, David found himself wondering, truly wondering, who the woman beneath the veil really was. Because the more he tried to look away, the more he realized he couldn't. The days bled into weeks, and despite David's best efforts to maintain distance, the space between him and Anna began to close in ways he hadn't anticipated. It started small. An offhand remark here, a brief exchange there. He wasn't sure when the shift happened, when he stopped treating her as an unavoidable presence in his life and started paying attention. But once he did, he couldn't stop. She had a way of appearing at just the right moments. Not intrusive, not demanding, but always present. He would find her reading in the library late at night, curled up in one of the high-backed chairs, her gloved fingers tracing the edges of the pages. Sometimes he caught her in the gardens, walking along the stone paths in quiet contemplation, her veil catching in the breeze. And then there were the moments when she spoke. Not the carefully measured words exchanged at dinner parties or the neutral pleasantries shared in passing, but the moments when she really spoke, when she let him see glimpses of the mind that lurked beneath the mystery. One evening, as he sat in his study, papers scattered across his desk, she appeared in the doorway. "How was the merger going?" she asked. David glanced up, surprised. He had grown accustomed to her presence in the house, but not to her taking an interest in his work. He hesitated, then exhaled, rubbing his temple. "It's complicated," and a step further inside, pausing just before his desk. "Because of the renegotiation clause?" David narrowed his eyes. "How do you—" "You mentioned it the other night," she said simply. "At dinner. You were distracted." He barely remembered. But now, as he looked at her, he realized she wasn't just observing. She was listening. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "All right, since you seem so interested, what would you suggest?" She didn't hesitate. "Invite them here." David blinked. What? The Whitmans, she clarified. Instead of endless back-and-forth negotiations, bring them here. Let them see what they stand to gain. Sometimes, people need to witness success up close before they commit to it. David frowned, considering her words. It wasn't a tactic he had thought of. His usual approach was direct. Numbers, contracts, forceful persuasion. But relationships and business were delicate things. Trust was built in moments, not just deals. And Anna understood that. Against his better judgment, he followed her advice. The Whitmans accepted the invitation, and by the end of the evening, the deal was signed. David was stunned, not just by the success, but by the realization that Anna had seen a solution where he had seen only a roadblock. He found himself watching her more closely after that, not in the way he had in the beginning, searching for flaws, try to unravel the mystery of her veil, but watching the way she navigated the world, the way she absorbed information, the way she handled people with a mixture of grace and quiet authority. He started seeking out her opinion, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. She didn't waste words. When she spoke, she did so with purpose, cutting through the noise in a way even his top advisor struggled to. One night, as they sat across from each other at dinner, he found himself engaged in a debate with her about market trends, something he never thought he'd discuss with his wife. But Anna held her own, challenging his perspectives, making him rethink things he had long accepted as absolutes. He caught himself watching her, not the veil, but her. The way her hands moved as she spoke, the thoughtful pauses before she responded, the intelligence that shone through every word. And somewhere along the way, his frustration faded. Somewhere along the way, the resentment he had carried, the resistance to this marriage, to her, began to shift into something else. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but for the first time, it had nothing to do with the veil. For the first time, it had nothing to do with what she looked like at all. The evening was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't settle so much as it lingered, a heavy, expectant silence that filled the air like an approaching storm. David had spent the past few weeks pushing down the question, burying it beneath the surface of his growing admiration, his shifting perspective, his reluctant acceptance of Anna's presence in his life. But no matter how much progress they made, no matter how easily their conversations flowed, no matter how often he found himself drawn to her mind rather than the mystery of her face, the veil remained. A constant reminder of what he still didn't know. Tonight, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He found her in the library, seated by the window, a book open in her lap. She always retreated here in the evenings, when the house was quiet and the world beyond the estate had gone still. David lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching the way the dim glow of the lamp cast soft shadows across the folds of her veil. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he stepped forward. Anna. She looked up, her gray eyes meeting his, unreadable as always. Yes, we need to talk. She closed her book slowly, setting it aside. About what? David exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. He hadn't planned the words, hadn't rehearsed what he wanted to say, but the frustration inside him had been simmering for too long. Why do you keep hiding behind that veil? His voice came out sharper than he intended, edged with something raw, something unspoken. Do you think I can't handle seeing you? That I'm too shallow? Anna didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't react at all. She simply regarded him for a long moment, then turned her gaze toward the window. This isn't about you, David, she said quietly. Then what is it about? He stepped closer, his pulse pounding in his ears. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like a test. Like you're trying to see how long I'll tolerate being married to a mystery. Her fingers curled slightly in her lap, a barely perceptible movement, but one that didn't go unnoticed. Finally, she stood, turned to face him fully. Do you really want to know why? There was something in her tone that made his chest tighten, something that sent a whisper of uncertainty crawling up his spine. Yes, he said. She was silent for a moment, then took a slow breath. Because I wanted you to see me for who I am. Not for what I look like, not for what others say about me, but for the person I am beneath all of that. Her voice was calm, but there was weight behind it, a gravity that made David's stomach twist. I've spent my entire life being judged for my face, she continued, her gaze steady. Admired for it, measured by it, defined by it. Do you know how exhausting it is to be seen, but never truly known? David's throat felt dry. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but it wasn't this. Too often, Anna said, her voice quieter now, people decide who we are before we ever get the chance to show them. I didn't want that with you. I wanted to know if you could look past the surface, past the expectations, past the assumptions. David swallowed hard. She had never been hiding. She had been waiting. And all this time, he had been so fixated on what he couldn't see that he had failed to recognize what had been in front of him from the very beginning. I thought, he paused, exhaling sharply. I thought the veil was a barrier, that it was keeping me from knowing you. Anna tilted her head slightly, considering him. And is that what you think now? David let the question settle between them, let it press against his chest until the answer came, quiet but certain. No. His voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't the veil that kept me from knowing you. It was me. Anna's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. David took a slow step forward. I want to try, he said, the words thick with sincerity. To really see you. Not just... He gestured toward the veil. Not just what's beneath that, but you. All of you. A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Anna's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Then we'll start there. David nodded, his throat tight. And just like that, the weight between them changed. The veil was still there. But for the first time, David realized it no longer mattered. The Whitman estate had never been so alive. The grand ballroom shimmered under the glow of countless chandeliers, the polished marble floors reflecting the golden light in soft waves. Laughter and conversation wove through the air, mingling with the delicate notes of a string quartet playing from the balcony above. It was a night of celebration. The merger had been finalized, a deal that would cement the Whitmans' legacy for years to come. Powerful men in tailored suits, women in glittering gowns, all gathered beneath one roof to acknowledge the success of an empire. But David hardly heard the chatter, hardly tasted the champagne in his glass. His gaze flickered, almost unconsciously, toward the grand staircase. Anna hadn't told him if she would be attending. She hadn't said a word about the gala, hadn't mentioned whether she would take her place at his side as she had done so many times before. And now, as the night stretched on, an unfamiliar tension coiled inside him. It was strange, this feeling. He had spent so long resenting her presence, then resisting it. And now, he found himself scanning the crowd, searching for her. And then the room shifted. The subtle hum of conversation stilled, as if an unseen force had drawn every gaze toward the grand staircase. A ripple of whispers passed through the guests, a slow wave of realization as they turned, one by one, toward the woman standing at the top of the steps. David's breath caught in his throat. Anna, but not as he had ever seen her before. The veil was gone. She stood poised, regal, a vision in deep emerald silk that hugged the curves of her form before spilling into elegant waves at her feet. Her dark hair was swept back, revealing striking features. High cheekbones, luminous skin, and those same piercing gray eyes, now unobstructed, their depth impossible to ignore. There was no hesitation in her steps as she descended. No uncertainty, no shrinking away from the sudden, unrelenting focus on her. The room was utterly silent, captivated by the woman who had, for so long, been nothing more than a mystery. David couldn't move. It was as if the entire world had narrowed to this single moment, to the measured sound of her heels clicking against marble, to the way the crowd parted effortlessly as she passed, their whispers nothing but background noise to the pounding of his own heart. When she finally reached him, he found his voice, though it was softer than he had intended. Why now? Anna met his gaze, her expression unreadable yet entirely sure. Because it was time. She turned then, addressing the sea of curious, stunned faces surrounding them. I know many of you have wondered, she began, her voice carrying with ease across the vast ballroom, why I chose to remain veiled, why I refused to reveal myself, even on my wedding day. A hush fell over the crowd. Even those who had whispered the loudest now stood in rapt attention. For much of my life, I have been judged by my face, Anna continued, her tone steady. Praised for it, defined by it, expected to be nothing more than what was seen at first glance. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And yet, no one ever asked to know the person beneath it. David felt a strange tightness in his chest, a sharp pull at something he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. I wanted to be seen differently, Anna went on. Not for beauty, not for superficial expectations, but for my mind, my choices, my actions. A murmur spread through the crowd, a slow realization dawning among the guests. Anna's gaze swept the room before returning to David. I want to know if my husband, if anyone, could see me for who I truly am without ever knowing what I looked like. David exhaled slowly, something unfurling deep inside him. He had spent so much time demanding to know what lay beneath the veil, convinced that it was the thing standing between them. And yet, standing before him now, unveiled and radiant, Anna was no different from the woman he had come to respect, to admire, to know. It had never been about the veil. It had always been about him, his own blindness, his own assumptions, and Anna had waited for him to open his eyes on his own. Slowly, David stepped toward her. The crowd around them faded, the murmurs drifting into the distance as he reached for her hands, clasping them gently in his own. His voice was quiet but sure. I see you, Anna. She held his gaze, something softening in her expression. I think I always have, he admitted. I just didn't realize it until now. The smallest curve of a smile touched her lips. And for the first time since their marriage began, David no longer felt the weight of uncertainty between them. Only understanding, only clarity, and something else, something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. Not yet, but soon. David had always believed that marriage was meant to be transactional, a balance of power, a carefully structured agreement where each party played their role and nothing more. But with Anna, it became something else entirely. Their home no longer felt like a gilded cage of obligation. Conversations stretched late into the night, shifting from business to books, from past experiences to shared dreams. The distance that had once defined them had faded, replaced by something far more intimate, an unspoken understanding that neither had expected, but both had come to depend on. Anna had become his most trusted advisor, not just in business, but in life. She saw things he didn't. She noticed the small shifts in negotiations, the unsaid hesitations in a business partner's tone, the moments when charm mattered more than force. When David found himself facing yet another crisis at Whitman Enterprises, it was Anna who suggested a solution before he had even finished explaining the problem. You're looking at it too rigidly, she told him one evening as they sat in his study, reviewing a proposal that had been rejected twice. David sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Rigid? It's numbers, Anna. There's not much flexibility in. You're offering a deal, she interrupted, leaning over the desk. Not a demand. And right now, it feels like a demand. Give them something they want, not just what benefits Whitman Enterprises. He stared at her, then back at the papers in his hands. The problem that had seemed insurmountable only moments before now had a solution that felt almost obvious. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his lips. You know, he mused, if you ever get bored of whatever it is you do all day, I could always use another executive at the company. Anna laughed, shaking her head. No, thank you. I prefer to keep you on your toes from a safe distance. But he admit what he said. She wasn't just his wife. She was his partner. She had become woven into every part of his life. And yet, it never felt suffocating. He had spent years believing that love was an unnecessary complication, that attachment was a liability. But with Anna, he felt none of the entrapment he had once feared. Instead, he found himself looking forward to their time together, to the quiet moments in the morning when they drank coffee by the window, discussing the news before the rest of the world had woken up, to the effortless way she made their home feel warm, even without trying, to the way she challenged him, forced him to think differently, made him want to be better. And then, one night, he found himself asking a question he had never dared to before. They were sitting outside on the terrace, a cool breeze drifting through the gardens. The moon cast a silver glow over everything, and for once, neither of them were talking about work or deals or the weight of their responsibilities. David turned to her, watching the way her hair caught the light, the way her expression was calm, at ease. "Why did you agree to marry me?" Anna glanced at him, her lips curving into a quiet smile. "I saw potential in you." David exhaled a soft laugh, shaking his head. "That's a dangerously optimistic outlook." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Is it?" He met her gaze, and for once, he wasn't afraid of the answer. "And have I lived up to it?" he asked, his voice softer now. Anna didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his with quiet certainty. She squeezed gently, a silent reassurance, a message in itself. "You're getting there." David had spent his entire life chasing success, building his reputation, proving himself to the world. But for the first time, he realized that this quiet, steady companionship mattered more than any deal he had ever closed. Because Anna had seen something in him long before he had seen it in himself. And because of her, he was becoming something more. Not the man his father had tried to mold him into. Not the arrogant, self-assured businessman he had once been. But a man who finally understood what it meant to truly see someone. And to be seen in return. The city stretched before them. A sea of glittering lights against the dark velvet of the night sky. From the balcony of their penthouse, the world seemed endless. Skyscrapers standing tall like silent sentinels, the hum of distant traffic rising like a steady heartbeat beneath them. David stood at the railing, hands resting lightly on the cool metal, eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Anna leaned against the edge, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the cityscape. The wind played with the loose strands of her hair, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden below. For a long time, neither of them spoke. There was no need. Then, after a while, David exhaled a quiet laugh. "I never imagined this is where we'd end up." Anna turned slightly, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But we did pretty well, don't you think?" David glanced at her, taking in the ease of her expression, the warmth in her eyes. There had been a time when he had resented this marriage, had seen it as nothing more than a transaction forced upon him. But now, looking at her, really looking at her, he realized just how much had changed, how much he had changed. He reached for her hand, his fingers threading through hers, their warmth grounding him in a way that words never could. "Better than I could have ever hoped." Anna chuckled softly, tilting her head as she studied him. "Are you saying you're happy, Mr. Whitman?" He smirked. "I'm saying I finally understand." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. He turned fully toward her, lifting their joined hands between them. "That love isn't about appearances. It's about the moments in between. The ones we don't see at first. The ones we learn to recognize over time." Her gaze softened, her fingers tightening slightly around his. "And what do you see now?" David smiled, brushing his thumb over the back of her hand. "Everything." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then stepped closer, resting her head against his chest as his arms wrapped around her. The city pulsed beyond them, stretching out in endless possibility. But here, in this moment, nothing else mattered. They had built something real, something powerful, not from beauty, not from obligation, but from understanding, from trust, from love. And as they stood together, looking out over the world they had carved for themselves, David knew, without a doubt, that this was exactly where they were meant to be. As David and Anna's story comes to an end, we are left with a simple but powerful truth. Love is not about what we see, but about what we learn to see. From the very beginning, David thought he was being forced into a marriage of convenience, one dictated by duty rather than choice. He resented Anna, questioned her, and saw her as nothing more than a stranger behind a veil. But as time passed, as words were exchanged and barriers were broken, he realized that love is not defined by first impressions or fleeting beauty. It is built in moments of understanding, patience, and trust. Anna, too, had taken a risk. She had chosen to walk into this marriage with the hope that, for once in her life, she would be seen for who she was, not for the features others admired or envied. She wanted to know if David could look beyond the surface, if he could see her before ever truly seeing her. And in the end, he did. Their journey was not without struggle. It was filled with misunderstandings, conflict, and doubt. But it was in those struggles that they found something genuine, something lasting. They built a partnership, a bond that grew not from obligation, but from mutual respect. From late-night conversations, from shared laughter, from quiet moments of realization when the weight of their past assumptions fell away. David no longer saw love as a transaction, and Anna no longer feared being judged for what others expected her to be. Together, they created something stronger than appearances, stronger than expectations. And isn't that what real love is? The kind that endures beyond beauty, beyond time. The kind that sees a person completely and chooses them anyway. So, as we leave this story behind, remember this. True love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and still chooses to stay. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of love, resilience, and transformation. Thank you for being here, and until next time, may you always choose to see beyond what meets the eye.